Greetings, Mark Garang here, publisher of The Sun. And today my guest is Amy Snow, who's the new chair of the Conway School Board.
Thanks
Amy?
for having me.
How you doing, Amy?
Good, how are you?
Good. I want to remind viewers that this will be posted on the Conway Daily Sun's website, and probably we'll post it on social media, and hopefully Bill on Valley Vision will pick it up so people on Spectrum can see it.
Great.
So, gosh, there's not very often it's like blockbuster news out of the school board.
That's groundbreaking.
But this week, holy smokes, right? Okay, so there's like 2 or 3 things. The big one, well, many big ones, but one is that school board decided to close a school, right? So why, and just to refresh people's memories, is that at the vote on April 9th, the voters decided to support the default budget, which was $1 million about less than the school board's budget. And it was Kevin Richard, the superintendent, who said, look, if we do that, we voters do that, we're going to have to close the school. And some people said, well, why don't you just take $1 million out of the $40 million? So did the school board decide to, ultimately, the school board ultimately decided to close the school rather than trim the budget? How does that work?
Well, the superintendent came to us with a recommendation. As stated at that meeting, he and his staff looked at the budget every which way to try to figure out where to find that $1 million. And without cutting staff and resources and programming, they came to us and recommended that we close the school to find that money.
And so that's what you went with, that recommendation.
We went with that recommendation. Yeah.
And then the other one that you didn't follow, Kevin, is closing which school to close.
Right.
So they chose, and I think people have, we know that people have talked about this for years now, which one, and you can make a case for either school or both schools. And then, but you guys went against the school's, Kevin's recommendation, and closed John Fuller. Why is that?
Well, in municipal government, at the town, at the district level where I work at the Conway Village Fire District and stuff, staff always bring recommendations, and the boards don't always go with the recommendations or do something completely different. I think from what I understood from listening to the board members, John Fuller is the older school. Pine Tree's roof is in better shape. Pine Tree's windows are in better shape. And then I think the master plan had a lot to do with it, because it makes sense that a lot of the residential development is going to be in that area of town where we all see the commercial development in North Conway. There were arguments for both schools, and it was one of the hardest votes I ever had to make, was to close a school, let alone try to figure out which one. And I think that, the administrator's recommendation was based on a lot of good facts. There's no three-phase electricity at Pine Tree. It's not on public water and sewer. There was the argument that water and sewer would be coming there, but that's going to be years down the road before water and sewer get that, through Center Conway and then down.
Right, because now the couple of the precincts combined, that's what they're talking about.
Well, they're talking about, the Conway Village Fire District combining with the town.
Right.
Right, so that has a water and sewer department.
Right. And
there's been talk of development just on the west side of Cobble Pond Farms in Center Conway, that big plot of land, the Merrill property.
Yes.
Developing, and if they have water and sewer, they can have more density. So there's talk of bringing water there, but to go from there to Pine Tree, it takes a long time. I'm sure you're aware how long. Well, we voted in 2006 to do that force main to North Conway, and it took 10 years to get that done.
So it's not overnight, for sure.
It's definitely not overnight. So,
but it is also true that most of the development, residential development, is in Center Conway.
That's the area.
Certainly East Conway, obviously, and that chunk of land you're talking about is Steve Morrill's land, which would be serviced by town water in years to come. But even without that, there's a lot going on. Old Davis Hill, all those areas.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but John Fuller, So is it unanimous vote?
It was a unanimous vote. Both votes were unanimous to close the school and to close John Fuller.
Right, and so the mechanical things.
And to move the 6th grade,
okay.
the vote that we made earlier this year.
Right. So there's a lot going on. So
yeah.
Okay. So before we get to that, so the John Fuller. So it's going to be done this summer, right? And you're confident that this can be that the administration.
Oh, I'm confident that they can do it, and I think they'll do it. They'll do it well. There's a few things I'm going to make sure I keep my eye on and make sure that there's like 90 kids in the instrumental program in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. We want to make sure that that stays intact, that, you know, we get enough teachers, because they're all going to be in one school now. You know, things like that. Make sure that the transition happens in a way that is smooth for the parents and the students. And I have asked Kevin that we want updates every meeting. You know, even if they moved 3 books, you know, what's going on, so the community can see the progress between now and the opening of school, the end of August.
And so Pine Tree is going to be K through
K2.
K2.
Yeah.
So you're going to rename it K2?
I don't know what we're going to name it. I mean, at one point, I read, I think it was in the paper, I read it, that, you know, Kevin had said, we're all Eagles now. Okay, so Kennett Middle School are Kennett Eagles. Kennett High School are Kennett Eagles. Okay, but Pine Tree was Pandas.
Pandas, right.
The Conway Cougars. And stuff like that. But now that all the kids are going to be in one school, so we haven't discussed this yet as a board, so I'm not really sure the direction. I don't have a preference. I think that there is a policy in naming schools that we need to follow if we're going to change the name of the schools. But somebody at that meeting brought up a good point. You know, even though Pine Tree and Conway are going to stay open, they're not going to be the same schools that they are now. You know, my son went all through Conway. I worked at Conway, you know, as a K-6 school. It's not going to be that school anymore. It's going to be a 3-5.
Yeah. But it's still, you know, I mean, it's sort of like worrying about, and I'm bringing this up, and I realize you're not, but it really is the panda tail wagging the dog. I mean, that's a pretty small consideration.
Yeah.
What do you name the school?
What do we name the school?
And no matter what no matter what you name it, it's going to be called Pine Tree. I mean, people are going to refer to it. I remember I don't know if you remember.
We still call Cumberland Farms Lehigh, some of us.
Sure. Or 7-Eleven, or,
yeah,
you know, and Bill Marvel, speaking of the paper, he said, I think he advocated changing the name of Pine Tree because people still confuse the new Pine Tree with the old Pine Tree.
Right, which is torn down.
Yeah, which is John Eastman athletic field, or whatever they call it. So that's kind of interesting. So, you know, sort of like the North-South Road, you know, when they renamed the North-South Road, when they named it.
Used to be the local road.
Well, it was kind of a local road, but then everybody referred to it, and it was under construction as the North-South Road.
Right.
Then it was a naming thing, and people wanted to call it, you know, like the Hannah Schneider Parkway or something, but it was obvious that it's North-South. Anyway.
Right. That's the least of our
I would think
things
so.
right now. And, you know, I would hope that this is me, I would ask that if they are going to rename the schools, to have the kids involved with that.
Yeah.
You know, have them come up with mascots and names, do like of a competition type of thing.
Do you think it would be named something other than Pine Tree, or would it be named like a Pine Tree K2? I mean, K2 is kind of a cool name because it's the mountain.
Conway K2.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's.
I don't know.
I
don't know. Like I said, we haven't discussed it as a board yet, so it's hard to speculate.
What would you name it?
I don't. You know, I really haven't thought about it much. I really haven't. I've got other stuff on my mind other than
I'm sure
naming the schools.
So what do you recommend now? John Fuller, one thing about the argument to close John Fuller was that it's a very valuable piece of property, right? I mean, just on.
I don't think that ever came up at the meeting. Was the value of the property? You know, I mean, that was one of the things that was for John Fuller was Whitaker Woods and all that property, but being right there in it's the center of town, pretty much.
Center of North Conway.
Center of North Conway, yeah. I
Right.
mean, it does have value for
Right.
sure. But if we decide as a board to sell or lease that building, per RSA, the charter schools have first refusal.
Really?
To those buildings. Yep. Is that I brought one of these with me? Nope.
So I think some people have forgotten this, but it's not just John Fuller. The school owns the property where the old SAU 9 building is.
Right.
And that goes right to Pine Tree. And that old building, you know, I don't know, 5 to 10 years ago, Joe Barry moved it, and that's where the
Cupcake
Cupcake
factory
was. Yeah, it's on Main Street by the gas station. So, so what's your preference? Do you have a preference what should be done with the? I mean, I've always thought that property is so valuable, and it, you know, I mean, just not monetarily, which I'm sure is worth a few $1,000,000, but that's to me is like short money in the long run. It'd be like selling Schuyler Park, like whatever that could be used, maybe for a school in 20 years or 30 years, or a municipal building, or a welcome center. It just seems like it's pretty. It seems like the town or the school shouldn't get rid of that property. That's my sense.
Right, right. So I did bring the RSA with me that talks about unused district facilities. Okay. So, and Lloyd did a piece on me the other day, and he misquoted me. We need.
What? Wait. Lloyd never misquotes.
He did. I didn't say we have 2 years to come up with a plan to use that school. We have to come up with a plan now to use that school within 2 years.
Okay, got it.
Or it's considered an unused district facility. And at that time, then the charter schools would have first refusal to do something with that school. And we have to report unused schools to the state and all of this stuff.
So you have 2 years to do something with the building.
We have to figure out what to do with it. And it has to be used for, let's see, extracurricular activities, administrative school functions, or sports, and for which the school district has no school board approved written plan. That is what an abandoned school is. So we have to come up with a written plan as to what we would do with that school.
But could the school, you could just sell it though, right? And you could
well,
sell
we could sell it. So we could mothball it, okay? But
Right.
we would have to have a plan to, within the next 2 years. We could sell it, or we could lease it. And we really haven't, again, delved into this as a board. We did talk about it at one meeting briefly, you know, and there are some people that feel they don't want to be landlords. They don't want to lease it. Some people feel that it's important that we hang on to it for a while to see what the population is going to do. And then there's other people that think, you know, myself, divest it. If we decided we don't need that building, let's sell it.
Really?
And use that money.
What about going to the charter school? I mean, the obvious one.
Well, if we sell it, they would have first refusal to
Right.
buy it at market value. Okay, I don't know if maybe and if they don't want it, maybe the town or
Right.
somebody could use it for something. There's been, you know, people have thrown things around like, oh, the police station could move
Right.
there or whatever. I have no opinion on that one way or the other. That would be up to them.
I mean, the obvious one is Northland Charter, Woodlands,
yeah.
Charter, but
Yeah,
it is kind of ironic that, you know, because they have whatever number of students they have, 150, right? I think. They've
Well,
quite a few.
and I said this to Lloyd off the record. It is kind of ironic. Okay, so the reason why the turn of events has happened the way it did is because of declining enrollment. Okay, one reason, not the full
Yeah.
reason, but one of the reasons is the charter schools.
Yeah.
Okay, if people have decided to send their kids to those schools. So now, if the school district decides to divest itself of that building, the charter school has first refusal for a larger building that could house more children, that could potentially
Yeah.
take more students away from the
Yeah.
Conway School District. I mean, they are Conway School District students, but from our public school system, you know, that our taxes pay for. So it's kind of ironic how that has to work out. But again, we haven't really talked about it. I know that's going to be on the agenda the next couple meetings to start figuring out what we're going to do with that building. And
So what do you think
Main
about the
buildings.
teachers? There's a concern, I mean, a correct concern about layoffs. But as we know, the school is always looking for teachers. I mean, always looking to fill positions, and there's always a turnover. I'm
Yes.
sure there are, whatever, you know, 10 or 15 or 20 people who are leaving the system for who knows what reason. So do you anticipate there's going to be actual layoffs? Like I know I think that was in the story too, about
Well-
we don't have to replace the Conway L principal now, correct?
the Pine Tree principal.
The Pine Tree.
Right.
Yes.
That's the one that has an interim
Yes.
interim
Okay.
principal right now.
Right.
Well, I know that on the special education side, there's a lot of vacancies, so those are available to people, you know. So each school has a principal, each school has an administrative assistant, and at least one secretary, right? They are all part of the support personnel union, and they can if there's a vacancy that they would like to fill, they could take that position, I believe.
You
Okay?
think there's going to be much movement that way?
I don't know. I really don't know, because this all happened so fast that we really haven't had an opportunity to talk. You know, since that vote, we haven't met with the administration. But they have, you know, we've asked Pam about that. Same thing with the AFSCME, with the custodial staff. We have shortages, so we'll be able to move them into the
Sure.
buildings and maybe not have the shortage that we have now. I think we may still end up 1 or 2 custodians shy, you know, because some people will take this opportunity to retire if they don't want to. I believe that the teachers' certifications will be looked at to see which grades they're certified to teach in. I don't see a lot of what they call RIFs, reduction in force.
Sure.
But
The whole idea, I mean, I think one thing, and I know I was a skeptic of it too, is this whole idea of doing K through 2 and then 3 through 5.
I was too. I was very skeptical at first. I thought it was a crazy idea.
But the idea is, right, is if you have K through 2 all in one school and 3 to 5, a lot more flexibility in terms of classroom sizes and teaching and overlap and all that.
More stability.
So you're a convert now.
Yeah. Well, I went to I was able to attend 2 of the 4 forums that Amy and Kevin had. And the more I heard and the more from them, the more it made sense, you know? So now you have consistency in curriculum for every Conway student. They're all getting, it doesn't matter now that, you know, they're in John Fuller and their test scores are higher, and they're in this school and their test scores aren't as high. They're all going to be getting the same education, using the same resources. The teachers will be working together in that grade level. So professional development, you know, for a second grade teacher or primary teachers, K through 2 are considered the primary teachers. They will be able to work together on their professional development, which all of that benefits the students, because it doesn't matter if teacher A walks into teacher B's classroom, they're teaching the same thing.
Now, what do you think? I mean, I know this was done primarily for financial reasons. I mean, you had to, because the voters voted for it. And it was, I think, a natural, obvious reason to do this, consolidation of all these physical buildings, because we kind of don't have as many students anymore.
Well, it's happening all over the country.
And it's happening, right, and certainly we cover Berlin and they closed them all, you know, except and consolidate into one. But, you know, and we've had different test scores from each of the primary schools, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. A lot of it just what kind of population you have.
Exactly.
But do you, I guess where I'm going with this is that you see that this is going to improve the programming in education.
I think, yeah, and it will level the field for everybody, you know. 2 of the schools get Title I funding, and that's based on the amount of free and reduced lunch, and 1 school gets no Title I funding, you know, so a lot of that has
I mean, one didn't.
One did not,
doesn't.
and
Was
2
that
did. John Fuller does not get Title I. So that tells you about the demographics. So it's very uneven. So now all the kids, regardless of your socioeconomic standing or anything, everybody will be getting the same education and benefiting from those grants and stuff. So the entire school will.
And I'm surprised that Pine Tree, because Pine Tree's got a lot of affluent new neighborhoods over there.
Well, so does Pine Tree, yeah, but so does John Fuller.
Yeah, but they're not Title I.
They're not Title I.
But it's surprising that Pine Tree is with all the.
I know.
But who knows? So the other concern about this old K2, 3, 5 thing is busing. Like, how much of a factor was it, and how did you determine? Like, to me, I mean, most families, when they have a bunch of kids, right, they get one, like, you know, 2 or 3 years apart. So you could have one here, there. You could have one in 4 schools.
Basically, yeah.
You know, so.
I mean, right now you can have them in 3.
You're right. Okay, so that's a good point.
And that campus, it's going to be 3 through 8. We'll have Conway L in the middle school all in one campus.
Right. So there's busing.
Right. So I'm not sure how but Jim Hill and Gretel Shaw both, you know, have been telling us since last year that the busing will be taken care of. They over the years, you know, we've been looking at this for 20 years, Mark, you know, looking at this, consolidating schools and closing a school. And they've looked at it and looked at it and looked at it. And they're pretty confident that no student will be on a bus any longer than a student is now. You know, the longest ride that somebody might have might be an hour, and it's not, and they're pretty confident that it's not going to be longer than that.
I mean, do you have any idea how many kids actually take the bus?
I don't know.
I mean, between the high school kids and the 9th graders and the 8th graders who drive themselves to school, it seems like. And I realize they don't, you know.
I know what you're saying,
but,
though.
you know, because in my office, and, you know, basically I sit up there and just look out the window all day. But I can see the buses go from North-South Road to CV Street. Giant buses, honest to gosh, they have like 2 or 3 kids in them.
I've never seen, well, my son graduated in 2004. So in the 2000s and the 90s, he was going through the school system. And very few parents picked up their students.
Right.
You know, they took the bus.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know why so many parents pick up their students. It would be a good survey to try to find out why. You know, is it something wrong with the busing? I don't know. You know, because the buses now seem to stop at everybody's driveway. That's you get behind a bus, like I go down West Main Street, and it's like they stop at this person's house, and then they stop at that person's house.
I mean, they didn't before.
Well, don't you remember the days of bus stops when all the kids in the neighborhood would go meet?
Well, they don't want anybody walking on the road.
I know.
And it's the helicopter parents. I mean, my kids graduated from Kennett in 2008 or 9, whenever it was, and you know, they took the bus. They took the bus to Pine Tree. I was in Eaton.
Yep.
I don't know. It just seems like a.
Yeah, I was in Albany, and he took the bus to Conway.
Yeah, it's just, and if you go, as you know, you go to John Fuller in the morning, it's a line of traffic down Pine Street.
Parents are lining up at Conway L at 3 o'clock, at 2:45, to pick up their kids at 3:15, and the line goes all the way around to the back. I mean, they have a nice transition now where it moves, but parents are waiting to pick up their kids. A lot of them. A lot of them.
That's one of those social phenomena. Who knows?
Today's society, I guess. You know, you pick up your kid and then you go off and you do your grocery shopping and you get all that stuff done. And before you go home, I'm not sure. I'm not sure why.
Well, I always think we could use. I know we've asked Jim Hill this. Is that why don't you just have smaller buses? But I think Jim Hill says the buses, whether you get a big bus or a little bus, they cost the same.
Right, and not only that, but when the football team goes to an away game, or the band has to go to a competition or something, they need that full-size bus for the gear and for the teams and for the.
But it just seems like on some of these routes, you could probably cheaper to basically have a fast taxi instead of really for 4 kids.
You know.
Uber.
Well, don't forget, you know, the little kids, the way buses are built now. Because at one point when I was working at the high school, I had to ride the bus because there were some issues on the high school bus. And we dropped off all the high school kids and then went and picked up the John Fuller elementary kids and dropped them off. Well, the seats are this tall, but the kids are only this tall. So the buses may look empty at the elementary, but there are kids in there. You just can't see them because the windows are so much higher. You know, I mean, the bus driver has to pretty much walk up and down the aisles, make sure there's no kids in the seats.
Do they have seatbelts in buses now?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
So the other big news.
But they're big cushiony seats, so, you know.
So if there's an accident, they can bounce off the cushiony seats.
No, that's not true.
So the other big news is that you're the chair.
I am. I'm the chair.
So, and you've only been on, you were elected
last year,
so you've only been on for a year. And Mike D., who we all like, and so this is not what's wrong with Mike D., but gosh, that was a little bit of surprise.
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of municipal experience.
Yeah.
I've been working as a municipal bookkeeper for 10 years. I was the president of the CESP for 5 years prior to that. So I'm very well aware of, you know, the RSAs and how to find policies and all that. And I think the board is just looking for a little different kind of leadership.
Do you have any priorities in as you're now that you've been anointed?
Well, right now our
appointed?
priority is getting through this transition. Right?
Okay.
That's our priority. I do have I'm working on a set of goals for myself. I haven't presented them to the board, so I'm not going to divulge them just yet. But yeah, I mean, in my mind, the most effective board is a educated and informed board. So to make sure that we have all the information that we need, including any RSAs or policies that apply to what we're working on, so that we can make the best decision for our education, because our our job is to educate our students. We set policy to educate our students. That's our job as a school board, to make sure that they're getting the best education possible.
I mean, what's frustrated, I think, a lot of people is that, and I think I wrote this in an editorial, is that when you have a system like Berlin, city council sets the budget, the school board's got to live with it. So the people who run for school board, you can't fight the budget at that point. Right. So they're really more interested, or their priorities are more about programming. And so here, as we all know, for the last many years, it's really about, the voting really becomes who's going to support the school, which means who's going to support the bigger budget and who's not. And it would be nice if we could get that out of that paradigm, so that the people, so you're worried, so not fighting budgets all the time, it's that you're working on programming and
Right.
improving the experience of kids.
So one of the things that Mike and myself and Randy were working on in the IRAC committee, right, is one of the things that came to our attention was there's no after-school programming for the middle school kids. And the rec didn't open till, I think, 5.
There's no Project Succeed isn't for them.
No.
That's for the primary kids, elementary kids.
Elementary, the 3 elementary schools. So they were getting out of the middle school and they were hanging out in the park across the street or going to the library and hanging out, and some of them were getting in trouble and stuff like this. So we have 3 Project Succeed programs, one at John Fuller, one at Pine Tree, and one at Conway L. And one of the things that we would want to work towards is maybe maybe we can take that Project Succeed that was in John Fuller and move it to the middle school, because we budgeted for the 3 schools to have Project Succeed. So now the 6th graders will still get their after-school programming, and the 7th graders can also benefit now. So they will have something to do between the time middle school lets out and the time the rec center opens.
Makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So, but again, we haven't discussed this yet as a board, so it's something that needs to be brought up, and we'll have that discussion, and then it's up to the administrators to, to figure out how all of this works, because that's their job. They do that. We tell them what we would like to see, and then it's up to them to try to.
I mean, what do you personally? We only have a minute left or 2.
Okay.
But what do you personally think about test scores?
When I was going many millennial ago, it seems now, when I was in school, I hated, we took the CATs, the California Achievement Tests, back in the 70s, and they are just a snapshot in time. And having worked in special ed, those test scores for that population was it really didn't reflect what they know. But, sometimes you hear when our test scores are great, it's like, oh, hooray for us, we're doing great. But when the test scores are bad, it's like, oh, it's only a snapshot in time. But I think what they're doing now, what they, meaning Amy and Danielle and all of them, are doing now, the way they're tracking, it's not so much about the test scores themselves, but are the kids growing? Are they getting better? And growth is a huge thing. So they may not be where they need to be, but they're way up here when they started way down here. And I think that's a great, that's a better marker. Unfortunately, the state test, the state scoring doesn't always reflect.
No, but
that
the growth, and that does seem to be, and I'm going to call it a buzzword, because we're on this search committee for the superintendent, and everybody says we're interested in growth. And actually interviewing Kevin, he says that too. So that is definitely the word of the day,
buzzword, yeah.
the word du jour. But at some point, after you get done growing, you can still do well on tests.
Well, yeah, and now colleges had moved away from the SATs, and now they're starting to move towards it, because the colleges are saying, yes, that's how you determine what the student knows and if they're going to be a good fit for that school, and stuff like that. So it's a century-long debate about test scores.
But they have their place.
Somehow you have to be able to measure. It not only shows what the students are learning, but how well the schools are teaching.
Sure.
And you have to measure that somehow.
So they're legitimate. You think they're legitimate?
I think they're legitimate, but I don't always think that they're fair for across the populations.
No, I think that's a fair.
Because even some of the brightest kids, I know, and for me as well, are brilliant, but they're not good test takers.
No.
You know what I'm saying?
And everybody has their skills, and someone who may be an actor or an actress may not do well on tests, or a musician or something. I didn't do well on tests, and I'm still not very smart. So I guess it was a good indicator for me. Amy.
No comment.
Okay. All right. Well, let's leave it on that note. It's been a pleasure.
Oh,
and
thank
nice
you
to see
very
you.
much.
And hopefully we'll get you back in another, by beginning of school year and see how
We'll
you're doing.
see how things are going, yeah.
All right,
That'd be
okay.
great.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Okay.